The band is back together, Doug, Walker Mehl, on a podcast for the first time in 2025, yet the Hornets, they're doing the same thing. They lost a couple times over the weekend. We break it all down today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We are free. We are available anywhere you get your podcast, and that does include YouTube. I'm Walker Mehl. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3. And there's Doug Branson, fashionably late in terms of when he was revealed on the screen. If you're watching us
making an
on
entrance.
YouTube,
when you've been gone for a long time, it's called making an entrance.
Well, you did a great job. That's Doug Branson. Everyhornetsboxscore.com. You can follow him on Blue Sky at Doug Branson. Also, when you go to the Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com, you also have the subtext information. And last but not least, he also hosts Locked On NBA. Man, it's been a while since we've been doing a show together. I was out for holiday break a couple weeks ago. Then you were gone to start the new year. And yet the Hornets, they're still giving us the same old here, Doug. They're still losing some games, baby. We know how to talk about this together. I know that.
I don't. Honestly, I don't. I don't know if I can talk about this level of losing, because it reached an even deeper level of losing than we saw last season. Actually, there's an eerily similar period from last season beginning around like December 11th or so, when I think they lost. Maybe that was when they lost LaMelo Ball. But they lost like 16 of 17 games. There was a game right in the middle that they won. And same thing has happened here, except I think they're now one more loss ahead of that schedule.
Good.
So yeah, I mean things are bad. They are comically bad at offense, and I think even in the games where you've had like Mark Williams pop off or Miles Bridges pop off, just like the offense as a whole is comically bad. I was looking at these numbers from Cleaning the Glass. Over the last 2 weeks, the Hornets have lost 6 games, Walker. But they've actually, over the last 2 weeks, have been the 6th best defense by points per possession in the entire NBA at 109.4, and yet they are last in offense with 98.7 points per 100 possessions on offense. That's 30th in the league, last place. But they clear last place by a solid 4 points per 100 possessions over Orlando, who is missing their 3 top players. Like, it's crazy how bad they are.
No, they've been terrible. And with that, I want to bring in our responsibilities here, because that is a great note to follow. If you are a sponsor of the show, we want to bring you in after all of the bad stuff that Doug just
who
mentioned.
isn't comically bad?
That's right. It's FanDuel, baby, and it's what this episode is brought to you by. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Also, check out the newsletter we have now. Your favorite pod has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Hornets newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free right now, LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. Start your day with the all-new free Locked On Hornets newsletter. Okay, let's go. Hornets lose to the Pistons over the weekend, 98-94. This was a game where you actually, in the first half, you go into the locker room with the lead. You think maybe because they have a couple of victories over Detroit already in dramatic fashion, both of those wins against the Pistons came down to the, and I mean very end of the wire. They still lose this one, 98-94. Third quarter just came out terrible. In fact, second half, they scored 29 points. It's worse, 29 points in the second half against Detroit. It's a worse point outcome than the 31 they scored against Houston, pretty much a week prior. And we've had some terrible no good, awful offensive halves. And then you get LaMelo last night. Like, some guys came back here, Doug. You didn't have your players like LaMelo Ball. You didn't have Brandon Miller in that game against Detroit. This game, you actually get some bodies back against Cleveland, but Cleveland's one of the best basketball teams in all the NBA. They've lost 4 games overall. They lost 1 game at home. Brandon goes 8 of 14, actually shot well from 3. He was 6 of 10 from distance. LaMelo in this game, not a great shooting night for him. 7 of 20, 3 of 11. Does go for 24 points, which tied the game high for the Hornets along with Brandon Miller. But still losing, maybe different ways, maybe different players in those uniforms, Doug. But they're still losing, and you're right. The offense is just bad overall.
Yeah, I mean, look, you mentioned it, Cavs, best team in the NBA. But not only that, is they were coming into this game off a road trip where they just eviscerated their opposition. They showed no mercy. And I think coming back home for them, knowing the Charlotte Hornets were coming into the building, I think there was a little bit cat playing with the food element here, particularly like in the first half. You didn't really have Donovan Mitchell score at all. I think he scored 2 points in the first half, and then I think 17 points in the second half to really put the foot on the neck. Like, they knew that they could play around a little bit or rest a little bit on their laurels and still pull this victory out. So you could look at this score and say 115, 105, hey, not bad. I'll take it, even though the Hornets extend their losing streak. But at the same time, this was not the same Cavs team as we've seen over the past couple of nights. But they did manage to score 30-plus in each of the halves. So I think you can take that as a win. Brandon Miller, I thought he played well. I thought he played with the right purpose, the right energy in his 24 points. His three-point shot came back. It wasn't looking very good heading into his injury. LaMelo's shot did not come back, scored the same amount of points, but was largely inefficient on the night, 3 of 11 from the field. I think you can trace some of the offensive struggles to the fact that LaMelo Ball has not been able to hit the three-point shot as regularly as he was earlier in the season. But I think also you can look at that and say LaMelo Ball's crazy three-point shooting earlier in the season saved a Hornets offense that was secretly dead. You know what I'm saying? Like, it made the Hornets offense look a lot better. The problems go deeper than that, and it's that the ball movement is terrible.
It's terrible, man. Yeah.
It's terrible because I think there's a lack of confidence to move the basketball, a lack of willingness sometimes to move the basketball, a lack of trust in other teammates to hit shots. But also I think it comes down to a skill and talent issue that you don't have enough guys that can dribble and pass on this team. And so, yeah, you're getting a lot of Miles Bridges drive ISO, Brandon Miller trying to make things happen ISO, LaMelo Ball trying to make things happen ISO, and the ball's just sticking, and it allows defenses like Cleveland to sit back and go, okay, we got you. We know what you're going to do. We're gonna pack the paint sometimes. We're going to be aggressive on your shooters. We're going to trap. We're going to play zone. We can do whatever we want defensively because you're going to give us the time to react to whatever you're going to do offensively.
Well, and Hornets basketball, while it's not been great in terms of success, they've not been getting to the postseason for quite some time. I do always think of Hornets basketball for a large portion of the last, 5-7 years maybe, as a team that did pretty well at moving the ball, right? Especially with James Borrego, which I think you and I were more understanding of the reason as to why they let go of Borrego than maybe some of the other members of the Hornets faction. At the same time, the offense did call for you to swing that basketball around. And if you look at the assist numbers for this team, they are way towards the bottom. I believe they're 4th or 3rd to last. One, you're not talking about a very good moving basketball team, but also they can't hit shots. So that will be an excellent, perfect storm, an excellent recipe to be towards the bottom in assists. And you're right. The dribble drive stuff where you have LaMelo that you trust, but he's not even beating you off of pure, straight speed, right? I mean, he's using a lot of deception, and then he's getting to the foul line, actually. Got to the foul line and shot 9 free throw attempts, which was nice to see against Cleveland. But who's the guy that just blows by you because they're an absolute blur with the basketball? Like, even a guy like KJ Simpson, who I thought actually gave you a couple of nice possessions offensively against Cleveland. KJ Simpson, these guys are just kind of snaking their way when they can into the paint, and nobody is still that amazing at it, right? To the point where you just can't stop them outside of LaMelo. It's funny, Doug, because I actually think that there are a lot of decent to really good passers. Like, I don't think that there's a lot of guys on this team where they just suck at it all together. This is what we praise Josh Green for. Miles Bridges has always been somebody, and especially as the years went on, I thought he got one of the better assist percentages at his position. LaMelo, enough said with him. Brandon, I think it comes and goes, but really it's because it has to come off of the dribble where I think he gets the turnover stuff. Mark Williams, good God. Like this game, a couple of games back against the Bulls, they were running their offense through him. I mean, he had some crazy nice, bounce passes from the top of the key. Like not just, oh, those are good. Like, wow, okay, you really have this in your bag. And yet you look at the box score and it's, ooh, good God, okay, they're way towards the bottom. Yeah, that's what's frustrating about it. They just don't have creators. And when you don't have a lot of creators and you constantly have to rely on LaMelo to be that for you, then it's going to be rough, especially, of course, when the guy's out.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, but I think the core issue is this team's not playing very hard. And I think it comes down to you've got a locker room right now that's looking around and going, after the way we've played and the losses that are piling up, like half, we don't know which half, but half this roster is going to be playing somewhere else, whether it's Greensboro or getting traded. And I think you're seeing a locker room that has just completely come apart at the seams.
It doesn't look great right now. Let's move on. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
So if we think one half, even if we don't know what half, we know one half of the roster is going to be gone. Does that just mean outright that the Hornets are in full tank season? What does that look like? We'll get to that in just a moment here on Locked On Hornets. Before we do, I'm going to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Basketball season, it's heating up. There's no better way to get real money action while watching your favorite NBA stars than with Prize Picks. Whether you're a diehard fan or just love some friendly competition, Prize Picks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Here's how it works. Pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000. Yes, 1,000 times your cash. Think LeBron's going to drop 30 that night? Maybe Luka is going to get more than 8 assists. Prize Picks just lets you make predictions and put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. I've been using Prize Picks for a while, and I can tell you it's pretty addicting. Last week, you might have picked up a lot of points because of what Jason Tatum was able to do scoring the basketball. Anthony Edwards, same thing. There are lots of players that you can pick, and then once you hit, you get your money fast, sometimes in as quick as 15 minutes. It's honestly the best way to keep the game exciting. Now's the perfect time to join. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, no need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Doug, when you were out, I put up a graphic. This was last week. It was against Chicago, I believe. And there was a lineup that Charles Lee deployed in the first quarter, by the way. And it was KJ Simpson. It was Isaiah Wong. Then on the wing, you had Tijon Salon. You had Daquan Jeffries doing that 3-4 stuff. And then at 5, you had Moussa Diabate. Not at different times in the first quarter. All those guys were on the floor at the same time. That was your 1 through 5 in the first quarter against Chicago. Now, they actually went to OT in that game. Eventually, they would lose. But once they put that lineup out there, I put a picture of Tank, the R&B singer, on Twitter because it's full-on Tank season when you're going with those players out there on the court. Now, Charles Lee might like the effort and just want, hey, we need a breath of fresh air. We just need somebody that's going to go crazy for the basketball. And that's all fine and good, and we all love it, right? We understand that. But clearly, the talent, it's going to be tough to win quarters, to win halves, to win games with those guys out there. And that leads to the question, I mean, is it obvious now that the Hornets are tanking and they're in Cooper Flagg season?
Now, you just hit the nail on the head, which is that he wasn't thinking tank. He was thinking, I've got to get somebody on this floor that's going to give some damn effort. And he did the same thing in this game. When you had Mark Williams not getting up the floor and letting Evan Mobley beat him on multiple transition possessions, you had Brandon Miller screaming at Mark Williams to run back for God's sake. I mean, the margin wasn't 30 at that point. Like, they had a shot at making it interesting, and you're just getting beat. And so then what does he do? He pulls Mark Williams, starts playing him with the second unit. Nick Richards wasn't much better in terms of his effort. And so he gets benched altogether in the second half. And you're playing Taj Gibson. And then Nick Smith Jr., shout to NSJ minutes here, 18 points in this game. He's one of the few guys. And Lee said it after the game, was not one of the guys that was getting us off to the bad start. He was somebody that came in and gave them a spark. But the Hornets have no choice but to tank. So here's the question that we got from Evan and 302 of the 24th Othello Harrington division in the Sicko Satchel. The question essentially was, are they tanking already? And the answer is yes, because they really have no choice, because their most talented players are not giving the kind of effort necessary to win basketball games. And so Lee is forced to go to someone that wants to play. How many times this season have we seen the Hornets play with a little bit of extra spark when there are guys that are fighting for their careers out on the floor, and then the Hornets get a little bit healthier, and then the effort goes down? I mean, they have no choice but to tank, and Jeff Peterson has no choice but to evaluate this roster and make heavy changes either at this trade deadline or at the offseason, because this team is broken.
No, you're right, especially if we focus on Mark just because he's a player people care about. You're right about this game. I think Mark was getting beat tons of times down the lane. There were times where Jared Allen was beating him as well. It was Jared Allen and it was Mobley.
Evan Mobley chased him out of the yard. Like, if you're talking about if he's got that dog in him or if Evan Mobley does, Evan Mobley said, woof, 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 get out of my yard, and just like put him in the rim. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, but that was the matchup where Mark Williams just didn't have enough. This is the question with Mark, because I've never thought of Mark as a low effort player, and we've seen against Chicago he was all over the place. Against Detroit, I don't know if I saw a lack of effort. It's just when you look at Mark Williams now, we talked with him on Friday, and I asked him if he was at 100%. He said, no, I'm not at 100%, but I'm close. I'm getting there. And so this is the same thing with Mark that isn't going to comfort a lot of people because of the injury stuff. But at the same time, it does make some sense because of the conditioning. And remember, this offseason, he put on a lot of weight. At the same time, I would like for him to just stand his ground, which also didn't really happen in this game. If you are just, you don't have it and they have to play you, like, this is again among the most minutes that he's played in a game so far this season, because they've been trying to wean him back into a little bit more minutes as the games go on. He's played 28 in this one against Cleveland. I'm hoping that's the excuse, but you're right, Doug. Like, there's no doubt about it. Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen too. They were efficient. They were running all over the place. That was the team that wanted to win more, which is also disappointing because they have over 30 of them, and the Hornets don't even have over 10 of them.
I don't think that players or coaches ever like outright say, we're tanking. Like, we want to get bad so that we can get good. I mean, a lot of these players might not even be in a Hornets uniform by the time they're good. So, like, they're not thinking that way. But I do think that teams lose belief in the idea of what this team can accomplish this season. And I think that's the challenge for Lee, is to and I think to a certain extent, Steve Clifford was able to do this with the team last season, was like turn their whole idea of the season around and say, okay, here's what we're actually playing for. Okay, postseason out of the question. Here's what we're actually playing for. And get them to play a little bit better as the season goes on. I think one of the benefits of this losing streak and take that Indiana win and just look at this stretch that they've gone in. And by the way, it doesn't get easier. They're about to go on the road for a lot of tough contests. Right. The good thing about that is that if there is a shuffle of the roster and you can get the team playing with a little bit more effort and they win some gimmies at the end of the season against teams that are coasting towards the playoffs, it's not going to hurt their chances. They're not going to be really on the fringe of being out of those top 4 odds. So it's actually a benefit to them. But I really hope the Hornets are tanking, honestly, Walker, because you've got LaMelo Ball. He's been out for a couple of games with, he comes back in this one, but he's been out for a couple of games with ankle soreness.
Everything's sore. That's right.
Wrist soreness. And so, like, the alternative to them tanking and saying, all right, we're just going to make sure LaMelo Ball's 100%. We're going to make sure Brandon Miller's 100%. The alternative to that is that you've got your highest paid player, your max level player, dealing with injuries from surgeries that he had last season and from a wrist injury that he had multiple seasons ago. So I really hope they're tanking, because the alternative is, you've got a disaster on your hands with a max level player that can't stay healthy anymore.
So, and the other way you know that they're going to be tanking is by trading everybody at the deadline, and because they're going to be trading players that theoretically are supposed to be helping you win now, even though it's not happening. You're trading that for draft picks, which we know are not going to help you go out on the court and give you 30 minutes. So that's the other way. And the issue with that is now the guys that were more than likely going to be moved to a different team, like Vasa Micic for an example. Like you look at Vasa, now he's just completely destroying his value. How about 1 of 13 against Chicago, 1 of 8 against Detroit, missed his only field goal that he took in the 5 minutes that he played against Cleveland. So it's full-on tank season for Vasa Micic, the way that he's been playing the last couple of outings. And you see some of these other guys like Miles Bridges, when we thought about, hey, maybe he's someone that can get traded, there still is going to be an opportunity for that. But we just had an episode right before we went on holiday break in different weeks where Miles wasn't playing up to the level of his contract. So now compare that to a year prior. Well, PJ Washington, got you a top 2 protected pick in the future for Dallas. Terry Rozier playing well enough to get you, a lottery protected, right, turned top 2 protected pick. Or I forget what the protections were, but they were light. You get the idea, though. Terry and PJ, while the Hornets weren't very good, you could see these guys are going to get you some real value. Like on this roster, I think Miles can, but it's not going to be as much as what Terry and PJ got you last year. It doesn't look like it.
The protections, this is important because I want to talk about this next segment. The protections for the Miami pick are top 14 this season, and then it converts to an unprotected first-round pick next season. And then the protections on the Dallas pick are top 2.
Right.
So that will definitely hit. They're in a difficult position without Luka Doncic, but they're not going to be top 2 pick. So guys have value for a lot of different reasons, and good general managers, good front office executives, which I think we're both in agreement that Jeff Peterson qualifies as that right now. He's a good executive. Yeah. He knows things, knows that guys have value for different reasons and can explore all of those options. You could have value because you can add something to a team. You can have value because your contract facilitates a deal, which I think Miles Bridges could qualify as that. I think Vasa Micic could qualify as that. You can have value because your deal is expiring. The Hornets have a couple of examples of guys like that. So, but also, I'll give you another one that's kind of a sneaky value. Players have value sometimes because they can be moved, and a team needs players to be moved sometimes to shake things up. Only a couple of ways you can really shake up a team. You're seeing it right now in Sacramento. I don't agree with how they did it, but they fired Mike Brown, and it's obviously inspired that Sacramento team to play a lot better than they have this season. The Hornets aren't going to do that with Charles Lee as much as some of the commenters would like them to do. Like, Charles Lee's a good coach in a bad situation right now. They will be patient with him, and it will bear fruit, okay? But you can also shake up a team by moving guys. And so I think that's where Jeff Peterson has to be like, all right, maybe I'm not going to get max value for these players because of how they played this season, but there is a benefit to shaking up this roster just for the sake of shaking up this roster.
And that'll be good. Maybe that's where the value lies. But what's going to be unfortunate is when we don't get much value in return from another team. And it's going to be like second-round picks, and that's as much as we're going to capitalize. I get it. But it just so people understand, it is not going to be like last year where you get 2 first-round picks that allow Bobby Marks to put you in the top 6 in terms of ranked assets. Like, I don't know how many of these assets you're going to get back that continues you climbing that mountain in Bobby Marks' ranking next year. It's not going to be, they got this huge package in a Miles Bridges trade. He's still going to be relying pretty heavily on Miami and the Dallas stuff, with the protections being included here as well. All right, coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
Okay, you see the bullet point. Jimmy Butler? ? Could be a bunch of different things. What does that mean? Should the Hornets go after him, even after the tanking conversation we just had? Where do we think Jimmy Butler lands? Big story in the NBA after his suspension and his comments at the podium a couple of days ago. We'll get to all that coming up next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. More Locked On Hornets ahead. All right, the Jimmy Butler situation is pretty interesting down in Miami. We've seen Jimmy Butler cause some drama before at a few different stops along his NBA career. So I forget the timeline on this. I know the order in which the events happened, but I forget exactly which day. All I know is Jimmy Butler, after a game, goes up to the podium, speaks to the media, and tells you that basically it was going to be really difficult for him to get his joy playing basketball again, still sticking with Miami. He wants to have his joy playing the game again, and that's not going to come in Miami. So after that, maybe a day or two goes by, Jimmy Butler is suspended for 7 games by the Miami Heat organization because of conduct detrimental to the team. This looks like it is coming to an end. Even if Pat Riley had released a statement before all of this started, released a statement on the Jimmy Butler trade rumor matter saying, hey, we're not trading Jimmy Butler, you know, the big old basketball mob boss with the power play. We decide when we want to move Jimmy. Now it looks like he is going to end up somewhere else because it would be best for all parties involved. What do you make of the Jimmy Butler situation, Doug?
Pat is no match for Jimmy Butler. That's it. That's just it. Pat tried to flex his muscle, and Jimmy said, I've done this in multiple cities with multiple. I did this to Tibbs. I've done this in Chicago, and I will do it in Miami. And now the Miami Heat are in an interesting situation. They've got to move Jimmy Butler, but because of the size of his contract and the way that the CBA has set all of these teams up with these aprons that make it really difficult to take on that money to make the move in general, it's going to be difficult for Miami to squeeze the amount of assets that would allow them to improve the team. They're going to have to do some addition by subtraction and not really some addition by addition like I was talking about in the last segment. So let's dig back into the sicko satchel here. And we've got Daryl from Chilliwack Company who asks, what are the odds that the Hornets go after Jimmy Butler? Walker, what are the odds that the Hornets make a surprise move here? Because it might be a surprise team. A lot of people talking Phoenix, a lot of people talking Golden State. There are so many difficulties, hoops that those teams have to jump through to go after Jimmy Butler. It might be a sneak team that jumps in on the Jimmy Butler contest.
Well, you know, look, if you're watching us on YouTube and you can see the bullet points, you can see the last two contradict themselves. If we indeed answer the question by saying yes to are the Hornets tanking. If you're saying the Hornets are tanking and then you also trade for Jimmy Butler, then that would not make any sense because Jimmy on the floor is going to help you win. The only reason it might make sense is if you decided that you're going to trade for Jimmy Butler and then decide to move him once more. What's his contract situation? Because he's going to be on the books for a little bit longer here, right? We can look that up. But he
wanted an extension in Miami.
Right.
I think he has a player option for next season for like $1 jillion, like $50 million. Like it's crazy.
Right. So I'm bringing it up now. So Jimmy Butler, that's exactly right. It'll be $52 million player option next year that you would have to imagine that he's going to pick up. So that would mean that you're going to trade Jimmy Butler. Maybe you'd get assets in return for that, but that would be the idea. Because Jimmy, with the way that this offense is so bad, one thing, Doug, that we talk about needing quite a bit is shooting. Yeah, you need tenacity. You need somebody that can create. You need great ball. You need a great ball mover. Jimmy does so many different things so well, and he's excellent. One thing he's not great at, even if the volume has increased just a little bit this year, I believe, it's shooting the 3 ball. So like LaMelo and Jimmy, I think they could work together pretty well. At the same time, it's not like a foregone conclusion that those two would just be a match made in heaven with one another because Jimmy doesn't want to stand in the corner and not be involved offensively anymore. Like where he wants to go, he wants to have the basketball in his hands. So if Jimmy isn't getting the basketball in his hands enough here, because LaMelo is the highest usage player in the NBA, then it's not like he's going to be happy here either. There are plenty of things working against Jimmy being in a Hornets uniform.
So let me just say that I agree with all of that. That the Hornets, it would be insane if they did it. It would go against everything that the ownership group has talked about on podcasts being in the second inning of a 9-inning ball game, that they're being patient, that this is an evaluation season. And it would, I think, it would be interesting to see if it turned them around enough to get a backdoor play in, but you would risk being sort of late, like the nightmare scenario would be acquiring a player or multiple players that made you good enough in a back half run to be just outside the play-in, or a play-in team that gets immediately bounced. And then you're deep in the lottery as opposed to having a shot at the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes, and not much better. But let me make the case for this, just for the sake of argument. The case would be if you want an immediate culture setter, locker room reset, there's no better way than to insert Jimmy Butler. And we know from experience that Jimmy Butler eventually blows up locker rooms, but it doesn't happen immediately. Like for the first couple of years of Jimmy, it's nice. He's dragged bad teams to NBA Finals appearances. And so it would be an immediate reset. I don't think LaMelo's usage matters here, because I think his usage this season is not because LaMelo wanted the usage to go up. It's because LaMelo knew that the usage had to go up. He didn't trust any of his players. You bring Jimmy, he's going to trust Jimmy. Like, that ball is going to move towards Jimmy a little bit more than it has to some of these other players. And I think when push comes to shove, Jimmy Butler can be a good three-point shooter when he's put in the right position, and particularly late in games. The Hornets have played a lot of close games this season. If you put Jimmy Butler in some of those close games, they actually, I think, win more of those than they've lost. And then you're going to be on the hook for $50 million, $52 million next season. But really after that, you're scot-free. It's not like you're invested. It's not a Russell Westbrook situation where you would be invested for him for like multiple seasons in an outrageous contract situation. You would be scot-free, and then you're free of the damage that Jimmy Butler can do to a locker room. And Butler has said, he's been on the record as saying, I don't care where I go. I can improve it. I remember, you remember the story of when he was in Minnesota and he goes to practice and he says, I want to play with a third team, not the second team, not the first team. Right. I want to play with the G League scrubs. And he takes that team and he beats the first team with like Jeff Teague and Karl Anthony Towns, right. And Gobert was still with him at that time.
Wiggins would have been on that team. Yeah.
Wiggins, yeah, that's right. Gobert was with Utah, yeah. So Wiggins, he beats that team up and down the floor, and then leaves practice and goes on TV and says he wants out. Like, that's peak Jimmy Butler, but he can take bad teams and make them good. So I don't think they're going to do it. Right. I think the probability of this is like 1%, but there's your argument for them doing it.
Okay, fair enough. You know what? I do actually, to the LaMelo and Jimmy thing, I'm actually with you. I do think that they would be able to work with one another. But to the point you made about it doesn't happen all that quick with every single one of these teams, happened pretty damn quick in Minnesota. I will say that. It was real. He decided to come in. He played 59 games for him, and he was moved after that, and there was drama really all season long. The last point, just real quickly, if you're talking about what it would take to get Jimmy Butler, already know, right? Like the one thing you have going for this team is they have a ton of assets. Like, and you want to punt on what is a pretty big strength to bring in Jimmy Butler, unless you think you could get 100 cents on the dollar for what you gave up for Jimmy. But every day he gets older, every day the perceived value is going to go down unless you just let him cook for 20 games and then sell high. Like that, it would be already no, in my opinion, with what it would take to go get him.
But I don't think you have to give up all that much, because again, Miami's going to be in a difficult position where they're going to have problems moving them. So let's say the Phoenix thing blows up. Let's say Golden State blows up and they say, you know what, we can't do it. We tried to make the math work. It doesn't work. We're out. Then again, they're going to have to go to some of these other teams. And then if you're Charlotte, you say, all right, Miles Bridges, Vasa Micic, and I think one other player makes the math work. And then you say, all right, second round pick, 2 second-round picks. Like, it's not going to take one of those protected first. Also, but when you look at Miami's protected pick converting, like just wherever Jimmy goes, this is good for the Hornets, because if Miami somehow misses the playoffs, which could very well happen, I mean, they could play badly the rest of the season, just miss it outright, or they could get into the play-in, and a situation like with what happened with New Orleans that gave them the extra first-round pick. Then if you're the front office, now you don't have a protected first round pick to play with in the upcoming offseason. Now you have an unprotected first round pick on a Miami team that might not be able to reset in the offseason. Then that pick becomes extra valuable. So I don't expect that first round pick to go anywhere. The Hornets have to be patient and see what happens in Miami to let those protections drop off. But yeah, I just want to be very clear. I'm not advocating for this, except for the fact that it would give me a little bit of life of saying like, all right, honestly, at this point, I'm so tired from 3 seasons of this and really like almost like 2 decades of not being able to win in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. I'm at the point where I'm ready for Jeff Peterson to go full Bruce Wayne in the 80s Batman and smash a vase and say, you want to get crazy? Let's get crazy. Like I'm at that point. I've gone insane.
We're crazy. Yeah, that's the thing.
I'm in on anything at this point.
I like the idea of Pat Riley going full Kevin Costner in draft day, saying, I want my pick back, and then forcing you to trade your protected first round pick to go get Jimmy Butler, to just go bring some chaos to this team and then decide to move on after that. You know what? Maybe we could welcome some chaos here just to lift our spirits up. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your podcast, and that does include YouTube. There's Doug Branson. He's back, folks. Everyhornetsboxscore.com. Also, go find his subtext information there as well. And then listen to more Jimmy Butler takes on Locked On NBA with Matt Moore and Hayes. I'm Walker Mehl. Listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.
It's you want to get nuts, let's get nuts. That's the line. I can't mess the original Batman line up.